Let's try that again, shall we? Okay, so it is a Friday evening, even though it's summertime here, it feels like afternoon, but it's almost 6 o'clock. So it's technically evening. So today I'm going to be reading and analyzing and talking about a fun myth, and we'll see what comes up, which is the myth about Thor and Loki in Jotunheim. And as you know, I try to present what I believe to be what's the word I want to use? The authentic view of Loki. Loki is very misunderstood. I think he's been misunderstood from the beginning. So in this case, I believe that even our ancient ancestors, there was probably some discussion about, was Loki just a troublemaker? Was he, was I'm sure people had differing views back then about him. But I do like to challenge the idea that Loki is this cowardly, sniveling ne'er-do-well who only wants to cause problems and mischief and only wants to hurt people, and selfish and deceitful. He's a trickster. There's a difference. And, there is no devil in pre-Christian Germanic mythology. In fact, there really is no devil just about anywhere. The only time you find beliefs in a devil is when you are dealing with an empire. And Christianity rose as Rome was getting too big. It was really what was happening, is that the Roman Empire was getting too big to handle. And so it became expedient for the Roman Empire to adopt a religion that could give them more control over this giant population with multilingual, multinational, population. And so they used a really effective tool. And it's just like now with politics. If somebody has a war they want to fight, then you're either patriotic and you want to be part of the war too, or, well, what is it that you don't support the troops, that kind of thing. Troops they're ordered to go into battle. They're not ordered to figure out whether or not a war is just or not. Their job is to take orders and go into battle. And so, lots of times we've seen it in this country where the government will say, well, what, don't you support our troops? And it's not about that. It's whether or not you agree with whether or not the war is good. But I'm getting off subject here. You need to have a villain. You need to have an enemy. You need to have a devil. And so what has happened now that there is this resurgence in our ancestral religions in the West is that people take their Christianized viewpoint and they simply project it onto ancient mythology. And so Loki has become the devil. But if that were the case, then you wouldn't have Loki and Thor hanging out together, because Thor is the opposite of what we would call the devil. Thor is the defender of the human race. He is the hallower. If you want to hallow a space, you bring Thor's energy into it. He is the one who defends Asgard as well as Midgard. He is seen as the most faithful, the most devoted, the most trustworthy of all of the gods. And so if Loki really was this devil character, you wouldn't have Thor and Loki going off and doing things. And this isn't the only time that it happens, but this is one of the myths. I'm supposed to have my book here, so I'm going to be reading from the myth directly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll read the whole thing, and then I think maybe I'll start analyzing a couple things, and then we'll see if there's any questions. So hang on for just one second. All right, I found it. So this myth is called Thor and Loki in Jotunheim, and I'm reading from the Masks of Odin. I like this book because the author gives a lot of really wonderful translations for names and name places. And that's important because mythology is very specific. Mythology is never just like somebody, putting together some cute story. It's never about that. And so you always have to look at all of the details. For example, in the mythology, I teach this a lot when we're talking about the Thor's hammer. If you go and watch the video I have on the Thor's hammer Qigong, I explain the mythology surrounding that, and I show you that in the mythology it's teaching you how to do Qigong, because who is Thor? Thor is the power of life force energy, the power of lightning, the power of the magnetic force, the magnetic field. And so, when you read the mythology, it tells you, there are coded instructions in there that tells you how to create that within yourself. Now, unless you know how to read mythology, unless you've been trained in other traditions that have an unbroken connection into prehistory, then you don't know. They're just weird little details. For instance, Thor wears a belt around his midsection, and without that belt, he loses half of his power. Why? And we have a lot of modern pagans and heathens, and a lot of scholars don't know why, and they try and think up why that is, and they really don't have any idea. I can tell you exactly why. He has gloves that he wears, iron gloves that he wears, and he has to wear them when he picks up the hammer, which is the lightning. Without it, he can't pick up the hammer. Why is that? That doesn't, unless you know what that means, that's just a weird little detail. So I talk a lot about that. But bottom line is that the naval center is where we store all of our power. And cultures that still have energy practices that have come from this time period, they wear big sashes around the midsection. Kung Fu artists do this. And our ancestors, our European ancestors wore big sashes around the midsection. And part of the reason for that is because it keeps the kidneys and the adrenal glands warm, and it keeps the navel center empowered. And that is for energetic reasons. Thor has to wear uh, iron gloves because iron is a conductor of electricity. And so it means that you have to open up your hands, that you have to open up the centers in your hands in order to transfer energy, whether that's for healing or whether that's for martial arts. This comes from energy work. And so this is in there, in the myth, in the mythology. And unless you have an understanding of that, you come with a modern Western mindset that has been divorced from that for 1,000 years, and you're taking your Christianized brain. I don't care if you're a Christian or not. You've grown up in the West. Your mind has been programmed to think in dualist Christian terms. Then you're going to look at it and you're not going to know what it means. You're also going to do the same when you look at Loki, and you're going to think, oh, Loki is the devil. You don't know the difference between a trickster and the devil. There's a big difference between the two. Loki is a trickster. And anyway, as I said, Thor and Loki would not be hanging out together if Loki is this devil figure. So I'm going to be reading the myth called Thor and Loki in Jotunheim. And first I'll just read the whole thing because it's fairly short, and then I'll go into talking about some specific things. So, and I'll see if I can do this, but I'll see if I can tell the story with pictures while I'm doing it. All right, so once an icy age drew over the lands, destroying crops and killing men and beasts. Thor, accompanied by Loki, Thor, accompanied by Loki, set out to remonstrate with the giant Rasvalg, who in eagle guise fanned freezing winds over Midgard. Where did he go? They had, of course, to take a roundabout route because, as noted earlier, Thor's chariot cannot cross the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, which connects the worlds of men and gods. Its lightnings would set the bridge afire. So they forded the river Ifing, which marks the boundary between those worlds. At Midgard, they received the hospitality of a poor farmer who had two children, Thjalfe and Roskva. To supplement the meager fare, Thor slaughtered the two goats which pull his chariot. Let's see if I can pronounce these names. Tanghnjostur and Tangrisnir. He instructed his companions to lay the bones unbroken carefully in their skins. During the feast, Loki whispered to the farmer's son that he should taste the marrow, which he said had magic properties, and the boy cracked a bone to do so. In the morning, Thor revived the animals with a blow of his hammer on each of the skins, only to find that one of his goats was lame. In a towering rage, the Thunderer threatened to destroy the farmer and all his family, but the old man appeased the god by offering his two children to be Thor's servants. Thereupon, Thjalfe joined the gods on their excursion, while Roskva stayed to await their return. One night, on their journey, they sheltered in a curiously shaped structure containing two rooms, one very large, the other small. Let's see if I can find that. Where is that? Do I even have that? Is this it? No, that's not it. There it is. Disturbed and alarmed by a loud roaring noise, the travelers hid in the smaller of the two chambers. Emerging in the morning, they found a monstrous giant asleep nearby. The house was his mitten. The roars were his snores. Beside him lay his sack of provender. Being hungry, the two gods tried to open the satchel, but even Thor was unable to undo the knots. So he set about trying to waken the giant. 3 times he struck his hammer against the giant's skull, which caused the sleeper to stir and mutter something about flies, but failed to rouse him. The gods went hungry. However, to this day there are 3 valleys cleaving the mountain where the giant slept. Eventually, the 2 Aesir and Thialfe reached the home of the king of the giants, whose name Loki means Loki of the outermost court. I know that's the Hulk, but he's kind of a giant anyway, so there you go. Here the gods were challenged to a series of contests. First, Thialfe ran a race against the giant's champion, but was ignominiously outdistanced. Then Loki, who by this time was ravenously hungry, offered to out-eat any giant. He too failed, for though the two finished together, the giant had consumed the platter as well as the food. Thor offered to... where'd he go? Thor offered to drain any drinking horn, but when he was handed a gigantic vessel, failed to lower the level more than a little. He was then asked to lift the giant's cat. Mortified by so simple a task, he nevertheless found himself unable to do more than raise one of its paws. He thereupon undertook to wrestle any giant and was laughingly faced with the giant's elderly nurse, who easily brought the Thunderer to one knee. Are you kids enjoying story time? After these undignified defeats, the gods left to return to their own sphere, accompanied part of the way by their host, who, once they were safely off the premises, proceeded to explain the illusions to which they had been prey. Though Thialfe had the speed of lightning, his opponent in the race had been thought, which easily outdistanced him. Loki's opponent was Logi, flame, which consumed not only the food, but also the wooden platter. The horn Thor failed to drain had its tip in the ocean's depths. The whole giant world had quaked with fear as the level of the waters was considerably lowered. The cat was really the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, which Thor had moved to an alarming degree. As for the giant's elderly nurse, Ellie, she was in reality old age, which brings everyone, even the gods, low in due time. When Thor, in a mighty rage, raised his hammer to avenge these defeats by trickery, neither his host nor any city was to be seen on the flat plain that reached endlessly in all directions. So, just right there we know why the giant's name was Loki. He was Loki of the outer court, which means he was the giant's trickster. Here we have Loki, who is the trickster of the gods, and even though he is of giant, he's a frost giant, I believe. He is called an Aesir throughout this. He's mentioned as one of the Aesir. So in terms of the giants, the actual giants, the macro giants. There is a trickster there as well. His name was Loki, and even Loki was taken in by the bigger trickster. So Loki, who can see into all of the truth, who can, peel back reality to show you what's really going on, even he was unable to understand what was happening. So let's start at the beginning, and let me talk through what I think is going on here, or at least some ideas that come to mind with this myth. So once an icy age drew over the lands, destroying crops and killing men and beasts, Thor accompanied by Loki. So they don't even tell us why. So it's not like, it says, well, there was this big problem and the gods got together and they decided and there was this big fight and Thor was forced to go with Loki because Odin and the other gods, there's nothing in here that says that there's anything unusual about Thor and Loki getting together and going and doing things. We think of Loki and Odin because Loki and Odin are blood brothers, and I believe that one could make the argument that Loki is the shadow side of Odin and all of that. But, here we have these guys, Thor and Loki, hanging out like they're buds, like they're friends. And Loki definitely respects Thor because we see that in the myth of Loki's flighting. That after he's done just railing against all of the gods, when Thor threatens and tells him to shut up, Loki says, because it's Thor, I'm going to shut up because I know he'll follow through. Meaning the rest of the gods, including Odin, won't follow through with what they say. But when Thor says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. There's a lot of respect there. So these, there's some respect here. Otherwise, they wouldn't hang out together. It wouldn't happen. Okay, so they went to, their intention was to go and talk to the eagle, Rasvalg. A giant who, took on the form of an eagle because they felt that this eagle was responsible for causing all of this icy age that was ravaging people, and it makes me wonder if this is a remembrance of the ice ages that our ancestors went through. So, I won't get too deep into it, but it's important to note that I follow what is called, I'll write it down here because I think it's worth looking at. I follow what is called my brain's not working very well. I went surfing today, so I'm a little loopy here. Anyway, I'll remember it. Anyway, I follow a theory that goes against the default belief that our Indo-European ancestors somewhere, somehow, we don't know how, sort of popped up out of the ground somewhere in Eastern Europe, and then in a matter of a few hundred years took over all of Europe and replaced all of the languages and the religion and the genetics with themselves. Doesn't make any sense. The Paleolithic continuity paradigm, that's what it's called. So you should look this up. If you are somebody who says that they really want to honor your genetic ancestors, then you need to look that up. Reason for that is because the belief that the Indo-European people just sort of sprouted up out of the ground somewhere 7,000 years ago and then just sort of exploded all over the northern hemisphere with their language and their religion and everything else, and everything else that was underneath it sort of disappeared. That is unique. There is scientists, linguists, historians, even those who believe that theory, don't ascribe that same scenario to anybody else in the world. They only ascribe it to Indo-Europeans. And I won't get into it, but that's because of the Indo-European migration theory started long time ago, back in the 1700s, and it was basically white people coming from Europe into India and saying, "Oh, they're speaking a language close to ours. Well, they must be our descendants," and that's laid the foundation for a bunch of racist beliefs, which ended up in this theory of the Indo-European migration theory. So the Indo-European migration theory is not only based on a faulty assumption; it's based on racism. And it is still taught to this day, by people who don't know any better, including scholars. But the Paleolithic continuity paradigm, notice that it's called a paradigm. A theory is one person in one discipline comes up with an idea of how they think something is, or the reason behind something, and that's a theory until it's proven, and then it's seen as fact. Until then, it's a theory. Like even though there is really it's virtually completely totally proven that evolution took place, we still call it the theory of evolution. But a paradigm is different, because a paradigm isn't just one group of science coming up with a theory. It's a paradigm because what was happening here is that you had linguists, and you had geneticists, and you had historians, and you had archaeologists, were all independently, through their own research, coming to the conclusion that the Indo-Europeans, their language, their culture, actually originated in Paleolithic Africa, and it came into the northern hemisphere with the first modern humans. That's how old it is. Now, they believe that to be true about all other Asian languages, and whatever. They see that, but for some reason, and the reason now is because it starts from a racialist false assumption. They make this exception when it comes to Indo-Europeans. But the paradigm, which is all of these different scientists independently coming up with the same understanding, of coming together and go, yeah, I saw that, and I saw that, and saw it. So the point is, paradigm makes it stronger than a theory. It lends a lot of power to it as a theory. And the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's interesting because we're talking clearly about something that sounds like an ice age. And so I think this harkens back to our Indo-European ancestors, from the time that they ended up in Europe. And what ended up happening was, in between ice ages, they showed up in Europe, and then another ice age came in and locked everybody into their little spots. That's why you have the Celts were in Iberia. You had what became the Germanic people on the north side of the Pyrenees Mountains, and then you had the Slavic people somewhere else, and you had the Greek in another area. They were all locked in by different sheets of ice, and over 40,000 years, their language slowly changed, and that's why you have different Indo-European languages. That makes a hell of a lot more sense than Indo-European warriors sprouting up out of the ground 7,000 years ago, and then marching all over Europe and dominating everybody. And then in a matter of a few hundred years, all of a sudden their Indo-European language changes into all these different languages. That doesn't make sense. Language doesn't work like that. So anyway, that was just a long way of saying I think it's interesting, because I think they're talking about an ice age. Thor and Loki go together, and as I talked about, that clearly shows some kind of a friendship that they have. Here's something interesting. Thor's chariot cannot cross the rainbow bridge Bifrost, which connects the world of men and gods. Its lightnings would set the bridge afire. So, what is Bifrost? What is the Bifrost Bridge? It says here, very clearly, the Bifrost Bridge, unlike the movie, the Thor movies and all that, it's not just some strange bridge in Asgard that goes over some, body of water. That's not what the Rainbow Bridge is. It is the bridge which connects the worlds of men and gods. So that means here that Thor and Loki are traveling, unless I'm not seeing this right, they're traveling from Asgard, and they're going to go through Midgard. We're going to go through, they're planning on going through Midgard. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, because the Bifrost Bridge only connects the worlds of men and gods. So they're coming to the world of men, but they can't cross that bridge because Thor, his lightnings would destroy the bridge. So remember that mythology always has something practical in the human body. True mythology, this is my assumption here, so you can choose to believe it or not, but true mythology, in my assumption, is information that is channeled to human beings and encoded within a very entertaining story is information that will teach human beings how to become, how to evolve, not only emotionally and culturally and psychologically and morally and all those other good things, but also it teaches you how to do energy work, how to do meditation. So the Bifrost Bridge, I believe, has to do with the crown chakra. And this is how the gods communicate to men, is through this. There's a connection from the heavenly realms, to humans through the crown chakra, because who lives in the crown chakra? Heimdall. Heimdall is the one who guards the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge. Heimdall represents the crown chakra. And I find that interesting. And so Thor cannot cross the rainbow bridge because the lightnings from his chariot would set the bridge afire. That tells me that we're dealing with life force energy here. And the intensity of the life force energy would somehow would be too intense for this connection. It's a very subtle connection. So anyway, I would need to meditate more on that, but that's what I get from that. Now let me get to the thing I really think is cool. So they forded the river Ifing, which marks the boundary between those worlds. So there's a river that marks the boundary between the worlds of gods and the world of men. So this river is extremely important. And so for this, we need to understand what the meaning of the name of the river. I don't know how it's pronounced, but the way it's spelled here, it looks like Ifing. I-F-I-N-G. F-I-N-G. No, I didn't say icing. That is the river. The name of the river is Ifing. And the translation that is given here is that Ifing translates in English to the word doubt. So that means that Loki and Thor have to cross the boundary between men and gods. This says that the only thing that separates us from the gods is doubt. Lack of belief. Now, that kind of sounds kind of Christian, like you have to have faith, but when you get over your doubt that the gods exist, then you are crossing that bridge. You are crossing that bridge to connect to the celestial deities. And as you know, one of the main fundamental things that I teach, in fact, if you follow some of my videos, like the ones on the free shamanism course that I have on my YouTube channel here, I tell you that the first thing that you need to do is get rid of all fear-based belief systems. One of the reasons for that is that fear-based belief systems do nothing but create doubt and fear. And so you cannot connect to the realm of the gods if you're living in doubt and fear. That's why I say get rid of all the conspiracy theory things, the Archon things, the belief in the Saturn moon matrix, and that you live in a computer program and that the elites are responsible and they destroy your life and that you're this poor helpless victim. All that stuff. If you live in that, then there is a real boundary that blocks off the connection from your crown chakra to the gods. And if you want to connect to the gods, you got to get rid of all that crap. This is, again, one of the reasons why, maybe you're not aware of this, but in ancient times, it was against the law to bring weapons into a temple, which is why a lot of times warring factions would meet in temples, because you couldn't start any trouble, for one, because you respected the gods and the ancestors, but number two, you can't bring your weapons with you. The reason for that is that just carrying a weapon puts you in your reptilian brainstem of fight or flight. It immediately puts you in a state of fear. You may be very low level, but it still puts you in a state of fear. And it disconnects you, puts you in a state of doubt, because you're afraid and you're ready in case somebody wants to come at you. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be smart, and it's not that people shouldn't have defended themselves or carried weapons. It just means that if you want to connect to the gods, you leave all of your weapons outside the door when you go into the temple. You release all of that. So if you want to connect to the gods, you got to get rid of fear, and you got to get rid of doubt. The other thing I say is that if in order to know what your true soul desire is and to be able to intend your reality and to be able to function on all kinds of other levels of shamanism, you've got to believe that the universe wants to give you everything according to your soul desire. So, again, get rid of the doubt. Easier said than done, but it's right here. That wouldn't, if it didn't have that meaning, then the river which marks the boundary between the worlds of men and gods would be called something totally different. If it was about morality, then the river which marked the boundary between the worlds of men and gods would be called unfaithfulness or evil or corruption. It's not. It's called doubt. The only thing separating you from the gods is your own doubt. That's it. So I want to go through more and more of this, but I want to stop and see if there are any questions. Before I do that, I'm going to take a short little break, and then I'll take any questions. I haven't looked to see. I think there's some questions on there. If you're new to the channel, please don't take up the Q&A texting with all of your talk and your opinions. Please hold off on that. And if you have a question, please write in the live Q&A. Please write question in all caps and so I can see it. Otherwise, I have to scroll past it because I think you're just spewing out your opinion. And then I will answer your question. Please make sure that you write out your question so I can read it. Otherwise, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And please think through your question. Don't be childish and silly with your question. Have an actual, honest question to help me with, so that I can be helpful to you. Okay? All right. Be back in a couple of minutes here. Okay, so I think I did see some questions there, which I am happy to address. All right, so Patrick O'Brien, I see here you have a question, and I see somebody told you how to write a question so I can see it, but I did catch that. You asked, would you recommend that book for people that are just starting out? By that book, I'm assuming you mean this, The Masks of Odin, which has some of the Norse mythology in it. Sure, why not? It's a great book. And the thing about this book, though, is that it's written by Elsa Britta Tichenol, who comes from some other, I don't know, religious weird thing, and I forget what it's called. And so a lot of what she says in her editorial, she writes a bunch of her opinions about stuff, and I think the majority of it is nonsense. What I like about it is that she translates names of the gods and names of things like the rivers and the stuff, and that stuff I like. I want to be able to see the translations of the names of the dwarves and all that kind of stuff. But I would forget everything else that she writes in there. She doesn't. I don't think she has any clue what she's talking about other than that. She's projecting her own religious whatever it is. Let me see. What was it? She was into some kind of what I would call a New Age religion, even though it's not that new. She was part of the Theosophical Society. Yeah, and there's all kinds of just nonsense beliefs in that. So I wouldn't look at that. But other than that, sure, why not? That was a long answer to your short question. Let's see here. Looking for the questions here. Zach Gage question. Are the gods' energetic forces meant to be invoked, or are they external beings which we evoke, a la the experiences of Sethicus, Boza, etc., or both? The gods can be, I don't know why they can't be both. Why do they have to be one or the other? Again, this is a Western way of thinking. Westerners, modern Westerners, our culture and our thought process is the result of 2,000 years of brainwashing. We have been brainwashed out of our original shamanic thought patterns, which, this is why people love what they call Native American shamanism, which of course Native Americans hate that because most of Native American shamanism has nothing to do with Native American beliefs. But we look to them because they represent to us people who still follow the old traditions, the old ways. Our people, whoever R is, wherever your ancestry comes from. If you go back far enough in time, you'll find that your ancestors operated from the old ways. Christianity came along and introduced a completely new way of thinking, which brainwashed us out of this understanding. And this understanding was holographic in nature. And I've shared this before, but if you want to know how our ancestors viewed the gods, talk to Hindus, because they are the last remaining Indo-European religion on the planet that has an unbroken connection to their prehistorical origins. So if you want to find out how our Germanic Indo-Europeans ancestors viewed the gods, you got to go to the only surviving one and talk to them. In other words, that's why you can't pick up the myths and understand it, because you ask those kinds of questions. Are the gods invoked or are they evoked? Like it's one or the other. But if you ask a Hindu person, I'm wearing Ganesha. This is Ganesha on my shirt. Ganesha is a god who has the head of a baby elephant and the body of a child. He looks like a big fat man, but he's not. He's a fat toddler with the head of a baby elephant. He's a child. You have to understand that. Ganesha is a child. So if you go to a Hindu and you say to a Hindu, is Ganesha real? They will say, absolutely, Ganesha is real. If you ask in the same breath, is Ganesha a symbol? They will say, yes, Ganesha is a symbol. They will say, you'll say, can you talk directly to Ganesha? Will he hear you? Yes, you can. He will absolutely hear you. If you are praying to Ganesha, are you praying to an idea about something, a symbol about something? Say, yes, you are praying to a symbol of something. You ask them, are the gods real? Yes, they're absolutely real. Are the gods only symbolic in nature? Yes, they are only symbolic in nature. Is there only one source? Yes, there's only one source. Are there many gods? Oh yes, there are many gods. You can't nail them down into any black and white because they don't live there. They don't live there because our ancestors didn't live there. You know, you talk to people who live in still in, you know, primitive societies, they don't make the difference between the dream world and the waking world. If they have a dream where with their mind they blew up a tree, you know, they can be walking down and go, oh, I blew that tree up in my mind yesterday. You know, they don't make the distinction there. They live in a holographic universe. It's not an either or. So when you ask me these kinds of questions, you know, are the gods to be evoked or invoked? The answer is yes to both questions. All right. Let's see here. Amy B. Question. Thor then could not use the crown chakra to come through. Maybe the river is the fourth dimension. I don't know. To be honest with you, you're way over my head. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe I'm just slow-witted, but those are, you know, I don't know what that, the fourth dimension, I don't know what that means. What I'm feeling, I'm not able to put it into words yet. What I'm feeling is that the crown chakra is a very subtle connection between the men and the gods. Qigong is a very intense practice. So Thor is Qigong, really intense. Now, truth of the matter is when you do Qigong, your crown chakra opens and it gives you, and I guess maybe I'm understanding it now, he crosses the river of doubt. One of the things that energy work will do for you is it will make you feel confident and you'll be able to feel a connection to the other side. And so maybe it's the same thing. It overcomes your doubt. It destroys your doubt. So maybe that's another reason why they crossed the river of doubt, because, you know, life force energy, when you use life force energy, when you do Qigong, go onto my channel, do the thunder, or do the Thor's hammer Qigong. Or if you want the most powerful Qigong, which in my experience anyway, which is designed to directly connect you to the ancestral masters. And if you do it, maybe you'll see them, maybe you won't, maybe you'll feel them, maybe you won't. You will be calling forth and connecting to the ancestral masters of at least my tradition. And that is if you go here to qigong.thunderwizard.com and get Celestial Qigong. But you don't have to do that. You can go onto the channel, the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel, and do like Thor's hammer, and there's all kinds of other Qigong in there that you can do. Qigong, by the way, is Qigong. It means energy work. Okay, so hopefully I answered that question. Nope, I don't see any more questions here. So let's keep going. So, at Midgard, so they did go through Midgard. So they had to go through Midgard to go to the giant world. At Midgard, they received the hospitality of a poor farmer who had two children, Thjalfi and Roskva. To supplement the meager fare, Thor slaughtered the two goats. Okay, so I'm sure there's stuff in there, but that's not jumping out at me, so I'll go past here. Here it is. Okay, let's see. So they were hungry, so they slaughtered Thor's goats at Thor's command and ate the goats. Thor just needed the bones. It was interesting. Thor just needed the bones. He didn't need the flesh, because obviously he would have said, don't eat my goats. But, you know, everybody ate the goats. And then he instructed his companions to lay the bones unbroken, carefully, in their skins. And, however, during the feast, Loki whispered to the farmer's son that he should taste the marrow, which he said had magic properties. And the boy cracked a bone to do so. In the morning, Thor revived the animals with a blow of his hammer on each of the skins, only to find that one of his goats was lame. In a towering rage, the Thunderer threatened to destroy the farmer and all his family, but the old man appeased the god by offering his 2 children to be Thor's servants. So his 2 children are called Speed and Work. And of the 2 of them, Speed went with them, and Work stayed to await their return. So now we see Loki in his, doing his thing, which is he is the trickster. And so Loki must have seen the value of these 2 children of the farmer. And he wanted to help he and Thor in their journey. Now, remember, all of the magical tools that the gods have came from Loki doing something, doing one of his tricks. So the thing is that what the trickster does, whatever he does, is always here to benefit you, to empower you, and to help you along your journey, and to help you in your evolution. Now, in the moment when you see him doing whatever he's doing, it may really piss you off, like it pissed off Thor. But as you saw from that, if Thor hadn't gotten so angry and threatened to destroy them, and here at this, again, Loki is the devil, but here's Thor is going to kill this entire family, right? So why don't we look at him as being evil? We don't. But whenever Loki does his thing, we see him as being evil. But as a result of that, the son called Speed went with them. And there's all kinds of things that go through my mind when I think about it. Because when you go into the land of the giants, time is not going to function the same way as it does here. When you go into the land like the macro giants, there's all different kinds of giants. There's frost giants, there's trolls, there's just your basic giant with one eye that walks around and eats, people, bites their heads off. And then you have, what we would call the Titans in the Greek tradition. The Titans are things like time, Kronos, Saturn, old age, gravity, all these things that even the gods must follow. For example, Thor is off fighting the giants all the time, right? He's in the east fighting the giants. So I've shared this with you, but let's make a connection here. Thor is the power of life force energy as well as the electromagnetic force. So I want you to go look this up. You can just Google this. Electromagnetic force. And in science, and I'm not a scientist, but when I was researching Thor and all that, I came across this, which is really interesting. The electromagnetic force is an imperceptibly thin barrier between everything. The thing that's keeping me from falling through my chair into the center of the earth, what is preventing gravity from pulling me through all of the molecules of everything, is the electromagnetic force. That's what's keeping my ass in the chair. If I try and smash my hands together, the thing that keeps them from going through each other is the electromagnetic force. I can feel the heat, I can feel the skin, but in reality, they're not touching each other. There is an electromagnetic force. And I can't remember the exact, I have it in one of my books, but the electromagnetic force is something like, I don't know how many trillions of times stronger than gravity, like immensely stronger than gravity. And Thor is that. So Thor is constantly fighting against gravity. Now, he's not going to win because eventually gravity will overtake, everything inside of a black hole, and gravity is going to win. But let me give you an example. A lot of you have heard this before, and it's just an amazing thing to me. The sun, the thing that gives the sun, that creates the light and the heat that comes from the sun, is nuclear fusion. So the sun is basically a ball of hydrogen. Huge, huge ball of hydrogen gas. And the center of it is, the gravity is what holds it together. It's so massive that there's this huge gravity field, and there's, gravity in the center of the sun. What's happening is that the hydrogen atoms are being fused. The intense gravitational field is actually smashing them. And that smashing of the hydrogen atoms explodes them, and then that explosion inside the sun, actually it bounces around in the sun for a really long time, and then it finally gets its way out of the gravity field, and we see that as the rays of the sun. So the rays of the sun that are coming out of the sun were once hydrogen getting smashed in the middle of the sun. Now, that is what is eventually going to force the sun to burn itself out. The gravity smashing those hydrogen atoms creates the light, and the sun will burn itself out eventually. However, there is still the electromagnetic force is also in there in those atoms of hydrogen. And the electromagnetic force creates a resistance so that it's a lot harder for gravity to smash those hydrogen atoms together. So if it weren't for the electromagnetic force, the sun would burn itself out much more quickly. Now, we wouldn't know the difference. It would take, I don't know how many trillions of years, but it would burn itself out significantly more quickly. Bear that in mind when I share with you what the Vedics understood at least 4,000 years ago. According to the Vedics, according to the Vedics, the sun sits in the east and worships the god Indra. Indra is the Vedic of Thor, is the electromagnetic force. The sun sits in the east and worships Indra for long life and the power to rule. So what they're saying, without using the same words, without knowing anything about modern physics, they are saying that the electromagnetic force allows the sun to live longer. How could they have possibly known that? They didn't. They knew it because they have this true tradition that goes back hundreds of thousands of years. This is who we're talking about. And so this is going to come through in the mythology. And the people who write these myths most likely don't understand why they're getting this feeling to write down these very specific things. I don't know, I'm sure that the Vedics who came up with that understanding that the sun sits in the east and worships Indra for long life and the power to rule, I'm sure they weren't thinking about the electromagnetic force as we know it. So there is information coming from the gods, and they come to us in one form through our mythology. So, speed is given to Thor and Loki to go to the giant world. And that would not have happened if it weren't for Loki doing his thing. Now, as I said earlier, I think the reason why speed was given to Thor and Loki is because time is much different when you are with the giants. So otherwise, I think time goes much more slowly. Things happen at a much slower pace. We're talking about, the forces of time and space. I mean, it just happens far more slowly. My belief is that the celestial gods represent, I'm trying to remember the word of that kind of physics. There's the physics at the subatomic level. I forget what that's called. And there are certain rules there that are different from the physics that we have in our larger world. So there's macro and micro. I believe that the giants represent physics on a macro scale, time, gravity, space-time, all of that. And that the celestial gods represent things, the power of physics that happens at a subatomic level. Thor represents the barrier between those two. He's half giant. So he is the only force. The electromagnetic force is the only force that prevents gravity from doing, completely demolishing everything. If it weren't for the electromagnetic force, we wouldn't be able to function. Literally, we would not be able to function. And that is exactly how Thor is represented in the mythology. That he represents the barrier to protect human beings. He also represents the barrier to protect the gods. He is that barrier between the giants and the gods, the giants and human beings. Because he's not truly celestial deity. He's not 100% Aesir. He's half Aesir, and the other half is giant. And that's why he has so much strength. And that's why, when he drinks when he offers to outdrink whomever with the drinking horn here, that from his perspective, he barely lowers it. But from the giant's perspective, they were afraid. They were afraid he was going to, completely destroy the universe because of his power. And so he's the only one that can come even close. And, this also, this fight between Thor and Jormungandr all the time. Thor and Jormungandr are always at each other's throats, but Thor can never defeat him. He can't come close to it. But he can affect him. Because Jormungandr represents constriction, like gravity. Constriction. And Thor is that power that keeps that at bay. Without him, constriction would destroy everything. So he keeps it at bay, but he can never defeat it. So there's that. We can go further, but let's see if there are any more questions here. I'm not seeing any questions. Wait, okay, let's see here. All right, Zach Gage, question. I hesitate when I see these big long paragraphs. Question, is Loki being a trickster something akin to the legends of Zen and Buddhist teachers who would use bizarre riddles, pranks, and weird answers to questions to teach their students? Yeah. That's why people say I'm such an asshole and a dick. Because when people ask me questions, half the time I will respond to their questions with a question. So, and that's part of what teachers do. Teachers are not here to spoon feed you. Teachers are here to stimulate you to do the work and stimulate you to think beyond your narcissism and your childishness and your selfishness. And, listen, I get it all the time. I get it all the time. There are some students that they get so bent out of shape because of whatever. There's something they don't like about me. But my job isn't for you to like me. If that was my goal, I would be far richer. I would know exactly what to say. I would know exactly how to keep everybody, I could create a huge cult following if I wanted to. I don't. My job is to teach. A true teacher is not going to have necessarily, huge followings because a lot of people's egos can't handle being tested and, stretched like that. But that's my job. So to answer your question, yeah, Loki he's a trickster, but he's also a teacher. Okay. Let us, here, question, Endekalb, question. Are questions limited to Thor Loki tonight? No, you can ask whatever you want. As long as it's a good question. Again, if I don't like the question, or if I think that there's an unconscious emotional agenda behind the question, then I'm going to want to pick it apart. But you can ask any question you want. I don't care. All right, so let's keep going here. And let's see here. How far along are we? How long have we? Let's take another break. And then I'll come back and read some more and answer some more questions. First, let's get rid of this guy. Okay. Okay, so I'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right, I am back. I'm ready to read some more. Let's see if there's any questions. No questions have come out yet, so excuse me. Something really interesting has come up in this reading. When we get to the part after they're in the land with Utgard Loki, Loki of the outer court, the giant, the giant equivalent of Loki. Thjalfi runs a race. First, Speed, Thjalfi, ran a race against the giant's champion, but was ignominiously outdistanced. So, what does it say here? It says that Thjalfi had the speed of lightning. His opponent in the race had been Thought, which easily outdistanced him. What does that mean? Thought is faster than lightning, according to the mythology. Now, I would bet that most of us, left to ourselves, if we hadn't read this myth, if we were asked to say, classify what is thought, T-O-U-G-H-T, what is thought? I bet you a lot of us would want to make thought into a god and say one of the Aesir. So as you know, I spend a lot of time telling people to get out of their head. I spend a lot of time telling people not to get stuck in their intellect. I tell people that the intellect and the mind are two different things. The mind is the moon. Mind comes from the same root as moon. It also comes from the same root as man, which means human. It originally meant both male and female. It meant human. Mind and... What do you mean error, try again? Mind, moon, man, human. There we go. So, the intellect and the mind are two different things. The human beings, the nature of human beings is mind. Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be called man. We would be called something else. We would be called thought. If human beings, what makes human beings is their ability to use the intellect, then we would be called thought. We're not called thought. We're called mind. What the mind does, what does the moon do? The moon reflects the light of the sun. The word for, the ancient word for sun was sawal. The ancient word for soul is also sawal. Sawal means soul. The sun represents the soul. The moon represents the mind. It represents human beings. It means that human beings are there to reflect the light of the soul. That is their essence. It is not to think. So you have the mind and then you have the intellect. We value the intellect in modern times because we believe that the intellect is what gives us everything that we need. Intellect comes from a Latin word, intellegere, which means to pick apart from among. The word to read is leggere, which means to pick apart. When you read something, you're picking it apart. The intellect picks things apart. Thought is a product of the intellect. Emotions are connected to the mind, but the real product of the mind is spiritual ability to see from a distance. This is what meditation is. Meditation is the ability to see things objectively, to reflect like the moon does, to reflect the light of the soul, to reflect objectively. This is why when you meditate, all of a sudden you're able to see things more clearly, and you're able to master your emotions, because the emotions are connected to the mind. And then you're able to make good decisions from the mind. The intellect does not give you the ability in and of itself to make good decisions. But we in the West live in the intellect. So it's interesting here that they call thought a giant. And, you know, who does Thor fight against? He fights against the giants. So it means that thought is useful, but it is not who we are. It's not, the Aesir are not thought, and human beings are not thought. The giants use thoughts. And so it also says here that thoughts have the power to win over potentially the gods, which means that thoughts can disconnect us spiritually. Now, the thing that we use to protect ourselves from frightening emotions is the intellect. So again, this is why people who smoke a lot of weed are disconnected from their emotions. They enjoy the feeling of being high, but in reality, they're disconnecting themselves from their feelings. And so somebody who is like a chronic pot smoker is not going to be connected to their fear or their anger. It's going to be stuffed down, which is why, again, in my experience, like chronic pot smokers, really angry, resentful people. That's why they need to keep smoking pot all the time, so that they're not angry, because they can't stand their anger. So they have to disconnect. So thought disconnects you from your human essence, from your mind. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't use your mind and don't use your intellect. I'm using my intellect right now to explain all of these things and to pick everything apart so you can see it. But the idea is that thought is our servant, not our master. But because it has this giant power, it can master us. And then it'll keep us trapped. That's something interesting. You know, you wouldn't think that, especially modern people wouldn't think that, but it's right there in the mythology. Thoughts are of the giant realm, not of the human realm or of the God realm. Okay, so let's see here. M. de Kalb says question, and then, okay, says, I was surprised to see a reptilian while under hypnosis, and it communicated through me. Should I be concerned? It was not a frightening experience. Well, what is a reptilian? According to science, our brain stem is from the reptilian age. That the first part of brains that were developed is what we would call the reptilian brain. Fight or flight, tend or befriend. Those are reptilian mindsets. And then we have the mammalian brain, and then we have the higher brain on top of that. For those who understand who Thor is that higher brain. That's why Thor is always fighting the reptilians. Our higher mind, our higher brain is always keeping the reptilian brain where it belongs. When the reptilian brain takes over, then we're run by fear. We're run by lust and greed. We kill, we rape, that's what the reptilian brain does. So just because you saw a reptilian under hypnosis, all that means is that you, under your hypnosis, you tapped into your reptilian brainstem and it spoke through you. That's all that means. If you read Michael Harner's book, Michael Harner, if you're familiar with him, I didn't say Warner. God, don't tell me what I'm typing. I know what I'm typing. Michael Harner Oh, I did type it twice. Michael Harner is the guy who started the neo-shamanic trend. He actually was trained by Siberian, or was it so like multiple shamans from all over the world. In any case, his first experience with ayahuasca, I believe it was ayahuasca, he went on a trip, and in that trip, he says he can feel himself descending in his brain. And every time he went deeper into his brain, he was in another world. And he finally got to the bottom part of his brain. He says he felt it. He felt himself get into the bottom part of his brain, and there he encountered reptilians. These flying reptilian beings that supposedly came from some other place, and they told him that they were the lords of the earth, and that they were using humans and all that kind of stuff. The same stuff you hear about reptilians now. He heard that. Now he's very clear. He says he had descended into the lower part of his brain, and that's what they told him. It was very frightening for him. And then he almost died. And so he was able to communicate, and they did whatever they did and brought him out of it. And then afterwards he went to the shaman and told him, this frightening experience of the reptilian beings, and that they told him that they were going to kill him and that they were the lords of the earth. And the shaman laughed and he said, they always say that. So this whole reptilians exist, but they exist in your reptilian brainstem. So if you're seeing a reptilian, it just means that you're projecting your own reptilian brainstem into your environment. And if you want to overcome that, you use Thor. Thor, among other things, is a god of the mind. He's lord of the mind. Thunar. Mind. God, don't type for me. I know what I'm doing. God. He is the mind lord. Thuwar, motherfucker. I did not say Thuwar. I said Thunar. Man, that pisses me off. Thunar. He is the mind lord, which means that he is the one that's able to rule over our reptilian brainstem. So should you be... No, I mean, it was hypnosis. Just because you had just because somebody takes ayahuasca and has an experience, as I just shared, it doesn't mean they're seeing the truth. Just because somebody, has a hypnosis session and they see something or do something or experience something under hypnosis, it doesn't mean that you're accessing some hidden realm of truth. It just means you're accessing a different part of yourself. That's all it means. So, this is why, experience is great, but experience, is just that. It's an experience. And the highest form of shamanism is to be in your waking state and be able to see the truth and know the truth. And that can't happen unless you become aware of what's going on in your unconscious mind. And you learn to take action out of consciousness. And that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of training. And that's what all meditation, energy work, ritual work, all of that is designed to only do one thing, which is ultimately make you mature and strong enough to be conscious of what you're feeling all the time and what your motivations are all the time, and to be able to take action that is constructive regardless of what experience or what feeling you're having in the moment. This is the sign of maturity. This is the mind of the gods. That's what all of it's about. All right, so let's see here. Steve Travesty, question. What runes best help us understand and learn from Loki? Now, this is the part where I say, why are you asking that question? It's a strange question to ask because the runes are the runes. It's not like, it's like asking which runes help us to connect with Odin. Odin is the master of the runes. The runes are the runes. The runes are the makeup of the universe. Loki, as the trickster, he's got access to all the same runes. So, first off, I don't think that runes should be used like that. You're wanting to use runes the way we use mantra. Mantra is designed to use certain syllables to tap into the unconscious mind to see it and understand it, and to learn from it, to become conscious. You're asking me how to best learn from Loki. The best way to learn from Loki is to be aware of all of your unconscious, self-centered, fear-driven, ego-driven agendas, so that when you catch yourself doing it, then you can take conscious action rather than unconscious action. You run the risk when you go to worship Loki. Loki doesn't want to be worshipped. Not to say that you can't worship him, but it just means that if you go to Loki's house and you're not conscious, he is going to trick you. And it's probably going to be very challenging. So don't step over yourself to go and be with Loki or learn from Loki. If Loki needs to teach you something, he'll show up. I wouldn't, go and seek him out. Now, that's different. Some people are destined to work with him and are more aligned to work with him, but I don't recommend that just off the bat people go and knock on Loki's door. He's going to mess with you, but he's doing it because he sees that you're not conscious. He wants you to be conscious, so he sees that you're trapped in your own illusion, so he's going to, he never lies, by the way. He never lies, but he will stimulate you so that you will want to buy into your own bullshit. And then you will step in your own trap. And then you will learn and you'll go, oh, I really thought I was doing this, but in reality I was coming from here. That's how Loki works. So short answer is there aren't any runes that are just Loki. I don't, again, it makes me want to ask you why, and it makes me want to pick you apart. And I only do that when I can tell there's some unconscious issue going on. So, in any case, I hope that answers your question. Emerson's coffee bike question: may the elf ritual be repeated after we have done it once? Yes, you can do it as often as you want. It's probably the most healing ritual you can do. If you're not familiar with it, go on to my YouTube channel and look for the light, I think this is what it is, the light elf ritual. Go look for that. I highly recommend it. It's the elves, by the way, are, if what you want is consciousness and you want a user-friendly way to become conscious, that's what the light elves are here for. So you face northwest, and there's a whole ritual involved, but the easy one is just face northwest and ask the light elves, the ascended masters, to help you. And what they will do is they will reveal to you how you are functioning in ways that are self-sabotaging, and they will show you how your behavior is not only potentially harmful to yourself but to others, and or they will help align you towards thinking and a path that will guide you to your highest evolution. That's what they're here to do. They were once humans and they're not anymore, and so they stand between here and oblivion, and they turn back to us and they help us to become like they are. All right, so may the elf ritual be repeated after we've done it once, and also what are others' way we can honor the shining ones? Okay, so I think I just kind of answered that, so that was a great question. Zach Gage question: what are Odin's ravens? Hugin and Munin. I believe it's translated as thought and mind. So I've always said that Odin, even though Odin cannot be smashed into a box, Odin represents or vibrates well with the planet Mercury. Is that how I'm supposed to say it? Every time I try and talk about Odin and Mercury, I always get, that's wrong, that's wrong. So whatever I just said, I just got a hit that was it. Odin represents the higher vibration of Mercury, among other things. And Mercury, left to itself, is the intellect. This is why Mercury in mythology is seen, and not just like Greek mythology. I'm talking about the planetary, astrological mythology. Mercury is seen as rebelling against the sun and the moon, the mind and the soul. It represents the young prince who's going to college, who thinks he knows everything. Then mom and dad don't know, and I know because I'm young and I'm in college. So it represents limited thinking. It represents the intellect, but the intellect is limited in comparison to the mind and the soul. And so Odin represents the liberated intellect, among other things. And so that means that the mind will be able to interface with the intellect. So Odin's ravens are intellect and mind. Now, it says that he sends those out over the whole world every day, thought and mind. And he worries about them, hoping that they'll come back. And he says of the two of them, he worries more about mind than intellect. It's really important to understand. And that's kind of exactly what happened. What has happened, in the past 1,000 years is that he sent out mind and intellect, and only intellect came back. The mind, we don't access as much anymore. In fact, we confuse the mind with intellect. So Odin worried about that, and it's sure enough happened. One of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to balance that so that we have an understanding, and that mind and intellect can work together, and that intellect serves the mind. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking that. Be happy. Question. You said something to the effect that listening to these stories helps us evolve. Is this correct, and how do they help us evolve? Great question. So our mythology, not just our mythology, but any mythology, any true mythology, even things like Lord of the Rings, I would put in the category of true mythology. True mythology, on the surface, is a very entertaining story. It's like watching, sci-fi. It's just really entertaining and fun, and it opens us up. It opens us up to wonder. It opens us up to think beyond our limitations, to believe, all that kind of stuff we tell kids. That's true. That's true. What's interesting is, we let kids imagine things that are impossible, but as soon as they start getting older, they have to stop doing that. Mythology is designed to keep us in that place of wonder. So that's what it does on the surface. When we're in that state, we're obviously open to connect to the gods and to the other realms, so that helps us. The embedded, hidden teachings are there, and they go into the unconscious mind of the average person, which means it plants seeds in them to help them evolve, to help them learn mystical truths. Now, that's one level. So that's for the layman. For the wizard and for the wizard's students, it's a whole other deal. The wizard is completely conscious of what the symbolism means. And a true wizard, if you give him mythology, even if he's not aware of it, and from another culture, he'll begin reading it, and he'll be able to tell you what that means, what this means, what that means. And so the wizard is going to be able to look at it and say, okay, it's telling us how to do a certain kind of meditation to raise our energy. It's teaching us about Kundalini. It's teaching us about life force energy. It's right in there. You have to know how to read it. So for the wizard, he then does what I'm doing now, which is he takes the mythology and he picks it apart, and he tells his students what to do with it and how to use that in ritual and in meditation and in energy work and in magic. It's all right in there. So That's what it's there for. All right. All right. Looking for other questions here. Mystical Times question. What are your thoughts on blending the whole breath with chakra meditation? My thoughts are that it is not helpful for you to take teachings that a teacher has given you and try and mix it together with other stuff. One of the things that, when you work with a teacher, teachers demand respect. The reason why they demand respect is because they want to be able to give you instructions and know that you'll go and do the instructions exactly the way that they have given them to you. And more often than not, that is for your protection, because you're dealing with very powerful things. And to go off and start, taking chemicals from the chemistry lab and throwing things together without knowing what you're doing, you could cause yourself a lot of harm. So you don't mean this way, but that's a disrespectful question to be asking me. The whole breath is the whole breath. Don't mess with it. Do it exactly the way I tell you how to do it. I'm giving it to you exactly as it was given to me. So do it that way. Now, I'm not saying you have to get, some people get all bent out of shape because they can't remember the visualization exactly. I'm not saying that. Just do your best, hit the posture, and do the breath the way I tell you, and leave it alone. It doesn't need anything else. And there are people, I took somebody apart not too long ago who was doing something similar and taking one of my teachings and then combining it with some other tradition's teachings and putting it together, and he was causing himself a lot of energetic problems. That's how people, damage themselves. So this is something, again, I've shared it before, but I'll share it again. A true lineage is a teacher who is given information from higher sources, higher masters. When you are initiated into that lineage, that teacher gives his or her energy to you in some form or another. That energy becomes a link between you and the ancestors that are working through him or her. When you do the whole breath, you are aligning yourself to my ancestral teachers. And so you are getting stamped with their energy. Now, you find this a lot in a lot of traditions where they will say you can't do any other tradition. And a lot of people understandably think that they're being, controlling and egotistical, but they're not. They're saying that this tradition has a certain vibration to it. And if you want to train with another tradition, go train with them, but their vibration is different. They've got different ancestral masters who have a different purpose in what they're teaching through that person. When you take a vibration like this and a vibration like this and you put them together, they clash. And then you end up with headaches, you end up sick, you can really harm yourself. You can drive yourself crazy. That's why there's these rules. Do not learn from other teachers. You are now taking a vow, I'm only going to serve or train in the such and such tradition. That's for your benefit. So you don't know any better. You're not asking me this because you're trying to be disrespectful. But I'm telling you, don't mess with it. Chakra meditation is chakra meditation. And I teach that. That's a separate thing. Don't blend the stuff together. If you're going to, I hesitated ever being like this. It is true that I put a lot of time and effort into giving practices that are user-friendly and that aren't going to limit you, because I know teaching through the internet, people are going to do exactly that. They're going to take this from this guy and this from this guy, and if I put these two together, and then I'm going to try that thing over there, so there's the really high-level stuff I can't teach on video because people could hurt themselves. This is very high-level stuff, but it's still very user-friendly. So to answer your question, my thoughts on that is don't do it. Okay? Just do it as I give it to you. You don't need anything more. And it's, it strikes me because, the techniques that I give are self-contained and they really will give you everything. The whole breath is one of them. If you don't have anything else that you do and you just do the whole breath for a half an hour for the rest of your life, it will open up everything. It will give you everything, every ability, every power all of the benefits of everything. It's a master key. I teach a lot of master keys. That's one of them. And that is the one that connects us to my ancestral tradition, the ones that, the masters that work with me. And Hulda, the goddess Hole, the earth goddess, ancient earth goddess. She's so old, people don't even know how old she is. But she's probably the first, at least in Europe, for sure. The oldest of them all, going back, I would say 40, 50,000 years. You know, she's the mother. You don't need anything more than that. It's disrespectful to her to try and improve on it. Leave it alone. Let it be what it is. Okay? So I know you didn't mean any disrespect by that, but it is, you know, in case anybody else is thinking like that, it's a childish, disrespectful way of dealing with very powerful things. So that's my answer to you. And again, nothing personal. Skyclad Faye, question. Do you think that physics is starting to prove some mythologies? Yes, I just shared one with you. I don't know if you were on when I talked about it, but you know, the understanding of how the sun works is exactly what the ancient Vedics said about the sun and the electromagnetic force. In fact, it's a more beautiful, more succinct way to say it. Quantum physics. Yeah, is quantum physics the one that's at the submolecular, the subatomic level is quantum physics? There's physics and then quantum physics, right? Yeah, quantum physics, if I'm understanding it right, quantum physics is the Aesir. Physics is the giants. Torn Legorf, question. Have you read any books by Carlos Castaneda? All right, so you raise an interesting question. You may be new to the channel. Generally speaking, I don't like these kinds of questions because it's disrespectful to me to ask me about another teacher. I'm here teaching, you should ask me about what I'm teaching, or you know, something like that. That's how I can best help you. Asking me about another teacher puts me in a position of potentially bad-mouthing another teacher, and I don't want to do that. And it puts me in a position of damaging myself, because when my ego does kick in and I want to badmouth another teacher, then I've let myself be seduced by your, you know, desire to disrespect what I'm doing here. And then I'm saying, oh, so-and-so, they don't know what they're talking about. So for future reference, please don't ask me about other teachers. If you want to ask me about my books and about me, I'm happy to answer. Having said that, I have mentioned Carlos Castaneda numerous times. The answer is yes. Not only have I read his books, I used to pore over them and underline them, and I lived by them for many years. Now, I'm not doing this to, again, badmouth a teacher. He's dead, but he was a fraud. He was a fraud, and he caused a lot of damage to a lot of people. But he was brilliant, and he definitely channeled the universe. His teachings about being an impeccable warrior are golden. You should read his books just to learn what it is to be an impeccable warrior, because it's absolutely true. And the most important thing about that is that living impeccably, which is not living morally or righteously, living impeccably is about how to manage your energy. Not stealing from another person costs you energy. The reason is that when you steal from somebody, you feel angry and you feel guilty, and there's a lot of energy that goes to deal with all that, and that's not energy you can't use anymore. It's gone. If you lie to somebody, the same thing. It takes a ton of energy to remember what it was you lied so that you can keep the lie going and not get caught in the lie. That takes a huge amount of your energy. Don't be resentful of other people. It takes a huge amount of your energy, keeping that resentment alive. These are all things of living impeccably. They're also things that, you know, religious people teach, you know, out of morality. God says don't do these things, but it's not about being the right thing. It's about learning how to use your energy and having as much energy available to you as possible. So his teachings on that are brilliant. Anyway, let's see here. Zach Gage question. I saw two ravens in Gnosis once when I reached back to connect to my oldest self. One was huge, filled the sky, and the other played around me. Both had the cosmos in their eyes. Odin's ravens? So you're asking me. I don't know. Why not? I don't see any reason why not. Torn Leg of question. Then have you heard of shaman going to other dimensions and bringing back artifacts? Okay, so I'm not going to answer that because now you're, again, wanting me to go into that. Whether I have or not is irrelevant, because even if somebody's able to do that, and I'm not saying anybody is or isn't, it's not what's most important. Don't get caught up in that. Don't get caught up in superpowers. Don't get caught up in all of that stuff. Focus on what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is that what's most important is for you to learn how to manage your energy and to be conscious. To be conscious of what's going on an unconscious level. That's more important than anything else. It's why even though I have been able to, and I probably still can do, a lot of stuff people would think it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean anything. So I think you're new to the channel. Please feel free to read my books. Please feel free to watch my videos. Go on to my channel, and the majority of your questions will be answered by that. So I welcome new people, but I also say, don't just come and watch the videos. I mean, watch the Q&As. Go and watch all of the videos. Go and read my books, and then you'll be able to ask questions intelligently about what I'm teaching, and then I can be of better use to you as well. Having said that, welcome. Matt Sweeney's beer, wants to ask a question. Is it okay to listen to music while doing the whole breath? Sure. Matt Sweeney's beer question. Sorry, it's right above. Forgot to put it correctly. Yes, it is okay to listen to music while doing the whole breath. All right, I'm going to take another break here, and I'll come back and see if we want to talk some more or if I want to end it or whatever. So hang on one second here. Okay, I took a look at the mythology and I wasn't able to see anything that jumped out at me that I haven't looked at. I'm not seeing anything more. There are a couple more questions here. Let's see. No, one more question. Kindred Spirit says, question, do you recommend any nutrition to help with any of your practices? Well, I'm not a nutritionist. What I do recommend is real general stuff. Stay away from processed foods. Find out what your body type is and what your body wants. We're not all the same. I'll say this, we're not all the same. I don't know if you're asking me, am I going to recommend a vegan diet or something like that? Some people, need things, I need a ton of protein, or I'm not a happy guy. And so I do eat a lot of chicken and fish, and I have to supplement, that with protein shakes. Otherwise, I can't sleep at night, and my body wants to be muscular. It wants that. So the more protein I eat, the happier my body is, and all of that kind of stuff. But some people don't. Some people have different bodies, and they don't like meat, and they need to eat vegetables. And so find that out. Look in Ayurvedic medicine is really good at finding out, what your body type is and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm not a master in any of those, so I don't give specific advice out other than, stay away from things like, fake sweeteners. It's poison, don't, stay away from that kind of crap. The biggest thing that I would say that's not connected to diet but has the same effect is stay away from all mind-altering chemicals. Don't smoke cigarettes. Don't. I would say limit, or if you want to get rid of alcohol altogether, I won't complain, but reduce that. Don't go out getting drunk. Don't smoke weed. Don't do ecstasy. Don't do plant teachers. I know that's a lot of people aren't going to like that, but that stuff destroys your energy body, and it destroys the glands of the brain. Qigong and yogic meditation were designed to replace the need for plant teachers. The Vedics and the Taoists thousands of years ago used intoxicants. They don't anymore. And they did that because they found the techniques that they use, energy work and meditation, to open up the glands of the brain, works far better, and you don't have any side effects. So, although I won't talk a lot about diet, I will say that, get all that crap out of your system. Don't do it. On a practical level, that stuff gets in the way of your ability to know what you're thinking and feeling. And you need that. A shaman has to be able to know what they're thinking and feeling, and to be able to access their emotions in ritual, to be able to create with their emotions. Okay? So, you didn't ask me about that, but that's my answer to your thing here. Matt Sweeney's beer question, what kind of giant is Loki? Okay, so we already talked about that. You can watch that from the beginning, and I tell you what kind of giant Loki is. So, it'll be archived, and you can go back and watch it again. All right, so I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. Let me do a little bit of business here. So, the most powerful energy work I just got through talking about, how if you want to open up the third eye, the pineal and the pituitary gland, go here to qigong.thunderwizard.com. Practice celestial qigong. If you're not ready to go to that high level of stuff, go onto my channel and just type in qigong in the search within my channel, not on YouTube, but within my channel. And then, binge watch all of the things I say about Qigong, all of the videos. I teach how to do really high level stuff. In fact, there's stuff in there that was secret stuff that came from the Taoist sect that I worked with and learned from. That stuff wasn't supposed to be given out, and I don't tell you which one it is, but there's one in there that you could only learn if you were initiated, and the Grand Master said you could learn it. It's in there. I'm not going to tell you which one, but it's in there. And it will do all the stuff, give you all the fancy powers that all the Taoist, masters have. It's also Celestial Qigong will also do that for you as well. If you want to support this channel, go to thunderwizard.com. There at thunderwizard.com, you can learn the specifics of shamanism that I teach, which is integrated. I'll teach you everything about energy work. I'll teach you about the 9 worlds and the 8 directions. I'll teach you how to set up a shamanic space so that you can open up a sacred space and be able to connect to all of the 9 realms, to work with the gods, the ancestors, the dwarves, to be able to change time and space and all that stuff, what ritual is really about. I'll teach you about the runes. Go there and sign up. I think it's the $25 level, and you get access to all of those videos for free. They're only there for people who sign up, subscribe. And I do weekly videos on that channel. You'll have access to that. Go to thunderwizard.com. It's the best way that you can support this channel. You know, and you actually getting something for it. You're getting a lot for it. Anyway, best way to support the channel. Then, if you want to know about my books, go to michaelwilliamdenny.com. A lot of people come on here and they just watch the Q&As and they know almost nothing about what I teach because they don't put the time and effort to read the books. Go read the books. Read the books, and there's tons of them. You can look through them. If you want the videos, I've got tons of DVDs, very powerful meditations and practices. Go to videos.thunderwizard.com. And what's the last one? Astrology.thunderwizard.com. If you want to learn a specific mantra and ritual just for you that will give you the ability to know how to unlock your unconscious mind and to be able to be conscious of all the ways that you're sabotaging yourself. So my experience, first off, let me just say that you can't just pick any mantra. I mean, you can, but if you want to be able to find the mantra for you that will give you direct access to your unconscious so that you can create the world of your dreams, you need to have a qualified astrologer who can look up and see which seed syllables connect to you, which planets are working with your conscious mind, your unconscious, and your subconscious. You know, you can figure out exactly which planet and what deity to work with in order to get money, to help you follow your path, or to help you connect directly and consciously and communicate with the planet and the deity that wants to be your best friend and hang out with you and talk with you and help you. That can be done only with a qualified astrologer. For that, you can go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. You can save yourself $100 because I have students there who have learned from me, and they charge a little less than I do. If you want to learn my astrology techniques and you want to create your own astrology business, go to, I believe it's astrologycertification.thunderwizard.com. So I think those are all of my, let's see, what else we got here. You can get a rune reading from me, runereadings.thunderwizard.com. And transformation is a rune reading, a Vedic reading, and a shamanic North Star reading, which will tell you where you are this year in terms of the 9 directions and what's going on in terms of the energies. Right now I'm in the Northwest, which is the ancestors. So I'm getting a lot of downloads from the ancestors. I'm working with the moon now, and I'm really enjoying that. That's because of the year I'm in. I'm in a Northwest year. Last year, I was in the center, which was all of the directions coming at once, and then my hell, you know, it was hell. On the one hand, my business went through the roof, and on a personal level, I lost the love of my life. She passed away. So, you know, that's what happens in the middle year. So if you find out a shamanic reading, you can find out what year you're in and what you can expect, and know how to best interface with which world and what energies are coming at you this year. So that's all of my stuff there. Can't think of anything else except tomorrow I sign a lease. I'm moving out of my beautiful 1-bedroom apartment that is right on the beach in front of my favorite surfing beach. I walk out of my front door and I go surfing. I did it today. Paradise. Paradise. I am moving now to a 2-bedroom house further south, 3 blocks up. One of the last houses, you know, here where I live, everything's getting built up, especially right on the coast. This is one of the last houses left. I think it was built in 1950. And it's a beautiful 2-bedroom house, and I'm signing the lease tomorrow. So that means that I will have a sacred area where I can do my practices and maybe teach classes in it, and I can do now, do videos on how, I can do live, qigong tutorials from, my workspace. I'll have a garage where I can put all my surfboards and everything in it. I'll have an office where I can do the videos, and then I'll have a bedroom, and then maybe I can get a girlfriend and she can actually come over and have a parking space here. There's no room for anything. So I thank you guys for that, because if it weren't for your positive thoughts and your support, I wouldn't be able to move up in the world and live like a real human being. So there it is. If you want me to continue to just focus on this teaching, then please go and make use of the materials that I have, thunderwizard.com especially, but any of the other services will allow me to do that. So that's it for now, my friends. If you have any desire to see a certain mythology talked about, specifically the Norse mythology, if it's a specific myth that you want me to analyze, let me know. But also, if there's any other kind of mythology that you're interested in, I may or may not look at it, but I'm at least interested, and if it sparks my interest and I have something to say, I'll talk about it. I'll take one last look to see if there are any questions, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Let's see. Mystical Times question. After meditation and prayer, I often feel energy hovering over the top of my head and feel as though a spirit is trying to tell me something. How do I focus on hearing their wisdom? Just relax. Assuming that it's an ancestral spirit, face northwest and just listen. The thing about that kind of communication is it's okay if you don't consciously understand it. It's going into your unconscious. When I work with students, a lot of times I'll be talking, but what's really going on is that the energy is going into their unconscious mind and teaching them. And then they end up learning things that they didn't know they knew. And it's just when you're in the presence of a teaching spirit, that's what happens. So I wouldn't worry about it. Just enjoy it. Just focus on it. If you feel it hovering above your head, just focus above your head and breathe and enjoy it. And just trust that the download is happening. You don't have to understand it. If you do, great, but don't worry about it. Batko, question. I'm 45 and quite lost after a divorce. What is the best way to get started? I feel very trapped. It's a huge subject. I mean, I can't, you're talking about a major life issue there. It would be really, I wouldn't be serving you if I just gave you some trite little expression, believe in God, or, count your joys, or be grateful, or, whatever. If you need my help and you want a private session, go to career.thunderwizard.com and you can book a session with me, because I'd need to spend some time talking with you and finding out what's going on to really be able to help you specifically, not just throw out some pablum that you can find in a greeting card somewhere. Okay? So I wish you all the best. I've gone through, a divorce. I was 49 when I went through mine, so I went through a very similar situation. I feel for you. If I can help you, I will. Go there. All right, so that's it for me, you guys. So I'm going to be moving. I probably will still be around, but in case there's a little radio silence, just know that I'm moving. But I don't think it'll affect me all that much. Anyway, that's it for me, my friends. Let's say goodbye to the giant world, and I'll talk to you soon. Maybe this weekend. We'll see.